Welcome to the Riley Lab Experiment Builder tutorial. My name is DeWitt, and I'm going to be walking you through some of the basics of Experiment Builder. So to start an experiment, of course, we have to first open the app, and then go through File, New, and then give it a name. For this experiment, we're going to call it Maze Example. And I'll talk about what this message means in a moment. All right, so now we have a new Experiment Builder file. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's go in the Finder, and they will all be saved underneath Documents. And they're in alphabetical order, so we just scroll up to M, and then we have Maze Example. And then you'll notice when you open it up, there are a few folders and files that are already in here. The first one is Datasets. This is the actual Experiment Builder file, and this is the library. Within the library, you will see audio, custom class, images, etc. This is where you will upload all of the materials that you'll use to run your experiment. Since we already have it open, we'll continue from here. So the first step is to familiarize yourself with the toolbox up here. You'll notice that it's divided by Action, Trigger, and Other. Anything that's an action will do something. Something will pop up on the screen or something will play. Anything that is a trigger will allow the experiment to continue if something happens. So for example, if we put this time icon into our experiment, then as it is explained here, the experiment will continue when the specified amount of time has passed. You can do something similar with tracking the pupil to only allow the experiment to continue if the pupil is fixed on a certain part of the screen, or you can do a keyboard trigger or any of these other triggers. And then the other has to do with data collection, and we'll talk about that later. Since we're using eye tracking for this experiment, we'll first need to set up a calibration section. To start that, let's drag a display screen into our experiment. To edit what appears within this display screen, simply double-click it, and then this white box will appear. The best way to write a message into a display screen is to use this option here, the A with the lines around it. This option here also allows you to add text, but as you can see, when it appears, you can keep typing and it doesn't center. To show you an example of what I mean, let's try editing this. This will keep going and won't automatically resize to fit your screen. So now you can see this gets a little bit of this gets to be a little bit of a headache when you have a longer text to enter. So let's now delete this and get rid of this text box. Okay, so now let's hit this button, and then when you double click it, you'll see that another window appears. This will allow you to type anything that you want, and it will save onto the screen beneath it. So I like to center it, and we can go kind of in the middle of the screen, and say something like, "Welcome to the experiment." Okay, so now we can close this, and as you can see, it populates right back into that first screen. To get back to the view that we were in before, simply click on the Experiment tab up here. Now, to connect it to the actual experiment, we need to first drag it from the Start node into this display screen. Let's actually give it a title that is a little bit more descriptive than just display screen. Let's call this Welcome. Now we need to link this welcome screen to the calibration action. To do that, let's specify that it's going to continue only if a key is pressed. Now we go through triggers and drag the keyboard icon right here. And then same as before, we need to connect it. To ensure that this trigger will work if any keyboard is pressed, let's select any, meaning any keyboard will be accepted. Usually we use the space bar, so let's tell it space. Now it's time to add the calibration action. To make sure that this calibration is going to work with the settings that are already configured in the eye tracker, let's go to Devices and select iLink. As long as this camera mount reads current, it will be using the current settings that are in the eye tracker. Now it's time to go into actual recording of data. To do that, we need to add a sequence. Sequences can be set to repeat a certain number of times, but since we're just using one maze, it will just repeat once. You will see another box appeared. We need to connect this from the camera setup. To enter the sequence, let's go to the sequence node up here in Structure. We can then click on Start, and then a new screen appears that looks just like the first. Let's add a quick instruction display screen so that the participant knows how to continue with the experiment. Same as before, we'll drag a display screen and then connect it from the Start node. Now that the participant knows what will happen in the experiment, it's time to add the maze. To do that, since it is an image, we can still use the display screen. Let's title this one Maze. While we're at it, we can go back and title this one Instructions. To add an image for the maze, we first need to ensure that it's saved in the correct location. I've already found a maze online to use for this purpose. Let's open it up. As you can see, there's a maze with an entrance on the left and then an exit on the right. To save this in the correct location, let's go File and Move To. And then we'll specify where it should be saved. As I said before, the library is where all of the information that you need for your experiment will be pulled from. So within the library, we see something that says Images, which is where we'll need to save this. Sometimes the file is locked, which means that Experiment Builder cannot access it. To unlock it, make sure that this box here is unchecked, as it is now. Now let's go back to our experiment to see what that looks like. To import the image that we need, we can click on this image icon to the left. It's called Insert Image Resource. So it's already selected here because this is the only image that we have in our image file within our library. So we hit OK, And now we have the image that we need to resize. Now that we have our maze sized the way that we want it, now we need to specify how long the image should stay on the screen and when it should disappear. To do that, since this is the actual experiment, it's best to have two triggers. So we should do a time, say if they are unable to complete the maze within 5 minutes. Since this is an easy maze, that's something that is very unlikely to happen, but that is sort of a fail-safe. We should also do a keyboard press. So that when they have completed the maze, they can press a keyboard, or you as the experimenter can press the keyboard to terminate the experiment. And then same as before, we need to go into these triggers to change their attributes. If you find that a keyboard trigger does not work, ensure that you have any keyboard selected and select press events as well as release events. Since Experiment Builder processes time in milliseconds, we'll need to set it to 300,000 milliseconds, which is 5 minutes. We can now click out of this and start to create an end to the experiment. Let's add another display screen. And we'll call this end. Generally, at the end of the experiment, we'll want to thank them for their participation and just say you've completed the experiment. To connect this end message to the end of the experiment, we'll need to drag another arrow from the sequence node to the end. We now have a complete experiment, and we can test it. To test it, you can hit this play button that says test run. Only one test run file will be saved at a time, which means that if you want to view the data from your first test run, it will be overwritten by the second. And this is what it is telling you here. So since you know that already, you can hit yes. Experiment Builder has let us know that there's an error and it is unable to play the experiment. This is because we forgot one important step. When we create our sequence, we need to make sure that record is checked on the left for the trial to run. Let's try that again. It'll prompt us to name it, and we'll just call it test.edf. Since we don't have anyone in the eye tracker currently, it won't be able to go through the entire experiment. So when we press the spacebar, a white screen will appear. To get out of this, since no one is currently in the eye tracking booth, hit Control-C. If you hold Control-C, it will end the experiment. As I was saying before, if we need to go through the entire experiment without the eye tracking components, we can simply go to Devices, and then iLink, and then click Dummy Mode. Now when we test the experiment, it will skip the calibration and allow us to see if all the things in our experiment are working. Let's try that now. And we'll hit the spacebar since we had a keyboard trigger there. Now we see the maze because it skipped the calibration part. And I'm mentally tracing the image now. You can do the same. And once you've reached the end, you can hit the space bar or any key, and then it will say you have completed the experiment. And since this was run in dummy mode, there was no recording actually made. But as I said before, if you go to Finder and then go to the actual experiment builder folder for this trial, you can find Maze example, and there will be a results file. As you can see, that appeared. And then once you open this will show your results. And since we did a test run outside of dummy mode, there's already one that's been created. Once you're ready to use your experiment for actual data collection outside of test mode, you need to deploy it. To deploy an experiment, you hit this button right to the right of the play button. And then we get this message saying that anything that was not created by Experiment Builder will be deleted. So any kind of node or anything that you might have put in the folder will be erased. That is okay, so we hit yes. Then we can title this whatever we want. Let's just title it Maze Example Deploy. So now we need to specify where it will be saved. You cannot save it within the original folder that was created for this experiment. So you need to save it outside of that. So let's go back to Documents, and then we'll save it here. Now to find that, just go back to the same location. You can just open it now and use this eye icon, and then you will be in the experiment. All right, we can skip through all of this now. All right, and that is everything you need to know to set up a simple experiment in Experiment Builder. Thank you for watching.